these three things together, you have to agree. You have to agree on one of the things that was the input to the system. So if these things are sensors, they're going to give a sensor reading at the end of the day. And eventually, you have to do something. If you satisfy these three things, you have solved the agreement problem. Guess what I'm going to say next?
It's impossible.
How'd you know? So it turns out that although you would like to have all three of these properties, you can't have all three of these properties. This was established by the most famous impossibility result that I don't have time to talk about today, but I promise I'll talk about later. It's called the Fisher, Lynch, and Patterson impossibility result, which essentially says that in an asynchronous network, any deterministic algorithm that solves consensus has executions in which it fails to terminate. This is going to turn out to be true in Paxos too. So every time you study a consensus protocol, we'll do it at some length in this class, honestly. You know, due to FLP, that if it never violates agreement and it never violates validity, then there exist executions necessarily in which it violates termination. But FLP is not a constructive result, so it doesn't tell you for a particular protocol exactly what those executions look like. So it's always a good idea when you study a particular consensus protocol to get your head around what are the scenarios under which you could get into a situation in which everybody keeps doing work, everybody keeps sending messages, but we never make any progress, we never decide anything. We keep getting infinitely close to deciding and then taking the wrong turn, and then getting close to deciding and taking the wrong turn. We know that those executions exist, but sometimes it can be quite complicated to construct them. Okay, now it's going to turn out that any agreement protocol is going to have to sacrifice one of these properties, but not all agreement protocols choose to satisfy terms. Termination is the safe one, if you had to choose one of these to sometimes get wrong, and what you're trying to do is agree, termination is the one. Right? Leader election protocols, for example, though, really, really need to terminate. Termination is really Leader election protocol that runs forever is going to cause all kinds of problems. It's typically going to be the case that systems that use leader election use it for a short period of time to temporarily elect a leader and then perform consensus to get everybody to agree that they're following the leader. And because of that, it's okay for leader election protocols, as we'll see next week, to temporarily make a mistake and elect more than one leader. So leader election protocols satisfy, in general, validity and termination, but not necessarily agreement. There could be two leaders for a little bit of time, there could be none. Whereas most good most good agreement protocols satisfy agreement and validity, but not necessarily termination. And this is going to turn out to be true about two-phase commitment as well. Okay, let's talk about the commit problem. So we kind of agreed, right? This is a pain because the compound operation move D is actually breaks down into two atomic operations, add D and delete D. And if one of these happens and not the other, we have a problem, right? And because they happen on different computers in a system in which partial failure happens, one of them could happen and not the other. What would you do? How could you fix it? Yeah.
Question, do we care if B gets it, like the operation completes and then crashes?
No. Okay. No, let's not care about that for now. And the hand wave for that from the database community would be, let's just imagine that servers can crash, but they reboot, and you have durable storage that you can write things to, and you know when you've written the durable storage. So let's not worry about that. What we don't want is for somebody to perceive D being in two places at once or zero. Yeah?
Implement like a tombstone for D on Alice.
Yeah, so, but you would also need the dual of the tombstone on Bob. So instead of doing a tombstone, I mean, it's the right spirit. Let's just imagine that we have like a hopper, a staging area, where we can test out operations and see if they worked, but nobody can see them, right? So a tombstone might be like that. Like you don't get to see the tombstone; it's just an object.
Yeah.
But let's imagine we have a an enclave or whatever, you know. So what we're going to do is we're going to put D in the enclave. which is like deleting it. So like, right? But we can take it out of there. And then similarly, we're going to put D in this enclave. And then we can just delete it out of there later. So we can have like one phase of the protocol in which we go to Alice and say, can you try to put D in your enclave and see if you, like, I don't know, run out of disk, or see if it works. Let me know if it works. And we can say to Bob, hey, here's this new value D that you didn't even know about before. Can you put it on your disk? Make sure you have disk to store it. Make sure it doesn't violate any constraints, blah, blah, blah. But don't expose it. And let me know if it works. Okay? Then I could say, if they both told me that it worked, it's going to work. And I can tell them to go ahead and do it. Another way of putting that is Jim Gray, the guy who invented this protocol, sort of great hero of mine, said it's actually very akin to the wedding ceremony, right? Where you have two parties who want to do something that is hard to kind of come back from. And when you say you'll take somebody, you're putting something out there, right? You know, do you want to go out? And you don't hear anything. That's a drag, right? So there's a minister who's doing sort of escrow, right? The minister's saying, do you take this D? Okay? And yes, I do. And do you? And then the minister can say, I now pronounce you. And that only works because if you say, I do, you've switched into a new state in which you can no longer give up. Like in the marriage ceremony, after you say, I do, you can't say psych. However, before you say, I do, you can say, hell no. Right? So there's a phase in which recon goes out and establishes two things. Can the parties do the work? And do they promise to do the work if told by the minister? Does that make sense? So Alice and Bob have agency in phase 1, and they don't have any agency in phase 2. Okay? What might this look like in Lampworth's space? We have a client, CL. We have a coordinator who's playing the role of the minister. And then we have a collection of what we might call participants. Maybe there's 2, maybe there's 3, let's just say 3. 2 makes better marriage analogy, obviously, but 3 makes. Okay, so the client says, I would like to move, actually screw it, we'll just do it with 2, because I'm doing a move. And I'll make an else involved. But they are typically called participants in the commit protocol. Okay? Move D from Alice to Bob. Okay? So the coordinator enters phase 1. She says to Alice and Bob, move D. D. This is called a prepare message. Let's see if I can remember the state machines for these things. The coordinator state machine begins in a knit. It can go to prepared by receiving messages, prepared, and then it can go to commit or abort based on the decision of the coordinator. And the participant state machine can go from init prepared. I'll explain the state machines in a minute, but I just wanted to have them up. So the coordinator sends a prepare message to Alice and Bob. And the way that Alice is going to interpret the prepare message is the way we said. She's going to stage the operation. She's going to see if she can delete D safely. And if she can, she's going to vote. She's going to reply with a yes vote to the coordinator. I'm cool with it. Okay? Similarly with Bob. both of the votes were yes. So the coordinator is going to shift to phase 2, in which he sends a commit message to Alice and Bob. When Alice and Bob get the commit message, they get rid of the sandbox and make the thing official. And make the thing official. Okay? And then typically we acknowledge the commit message too, although it's not necessary for the purposes of this discussion. Okay, well, what does this mean? This means that in the coordinator, they're going to begin in an initialized state. And when they've received yes messages, when they've received yes messages from all replicas, they can transition into a prepared state and send a commit message to everybody. However, if they've received a no message from even a single replica, they're going to send a no vote to everybody. Participants are going to begin in an init state. When they get the message from the coordinator, they can either decide to vote no, in which case they can go right to abort, because they know that if anybody votes no, everybody votes no, just like in the marriage ceremony. Or they go to a prepared state. And if they're in a prepared state, the transition out of the prepared state into the abort or commit state can only be made based on the decision given to them by the coordinator. Yeah?
Based on what situations they would say no?
Lots of situations. So, for example, Bob tries to write D to his disk, but he can't because his disk is full. So he can't stage that operation. So the only safe thing he can do is say no. Because if we never did anything, everything's fine. Or it could be that like this is a database, and if I wrote D, I would violate some constraint, because I said there can only be one D. Now there's 2 Ds, so I wouldn't be able to do that. I can't accept the right.
So only for stuff that is deterministic, they can say no? So like if it crashes, obviously there's no, it's gonna crash, right?
Right?
So I'm just saying like, they will only say no for stuff that they can determine they can't.
But yeah, sure, but I mean, obviously I can't say no if I'm crashed.
Or you will crash, that's what I'm
Well, I don't
saying.
know if I'm gonna crash.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, they try to do the thing, where the thing could be just about anything, and it either succeeds or fails. Right, so you imagine you got some Python code, I told you to do a thing, you say try, you try to do the thing, and then you say vote yes if you did the thing, and if you went into the exception block, then something went wrong, so vote no. So it's like, I don't know, anything that raised an exception is a no, you know? Yeah.
So, well, I missed you erasing the transition from prepared to abort on the coordinator. So it goes from the init state to the prepared state after it is sent out the prepared messages.
Yeah, you know, I did this wrong. So it should have been like, there's the initial state, and then there's like the state that it goes into when it gets the thing from the client. So that's like, I don't know, pending or something like that. And for pending, you know, I have sent out messages, and then I either get all yeses, in which case I can take this transition, or I get even a single no, in which case I can take this transition. Or in which case I must take this transition.
Right.
And then similarly with clients, let's see, from the init state, you get some messages. So I kind of did the same thing. There should have been like, there was an init, there's like a pending, which is the state you're in after getting the messages. And once you've gotten the messages, you stage the work, and you either decide I can't do the work, or I can do the work. And once you've voted yes, you have abdicated your right to take a transition into A. Once you, like from here, you can always go into A. You can always say, I won't do it. I do not agree to marry you, right? But once you have said, I do, you have to do whatever the minister says. Now your partner might have said, I do not. You said, I do. And the minister says, I do not pronounce it, and that's fine. But once you say yes, you can't get out of this anymore. You can only go down the route given to you by the message. Yeah?
So what happens if there's a crash after sending a yes, but before getting the commit message?
That's fine, because in that case, so for example, Bob crashes.
Yeah.
Think of it in terms of agreement here. Have we violated agreement? No, because we decided to commit. Everybody decided to commit. Did we violate validity? No, we never violate validity really in two-phase commit because there's only 2 possibilities. Did we violate termination? Actually, no, because in some sense, at least in a theoretical sense, the commit point is here. The very moment that the coordinator knows that everybody voted yes, the coordinator decides what the deal is. Even if it falls on deaf ears, even if nobody ever knows. The fact is, no one will be able to perceive an inconsistency while Bob's down. And when Bob comes back up, his right-hand log, his disk will reflect the fact that he committed that right, because he would never have voted yes if he hadn't staged it, right? So it is true that in the event that Bob crashes, if Bob recovers, the coordinator might have to rebroadcast the commit message. Another way of saying that is that commit messages may need to be reliably broadcast so that everybody eventually knows the commit abort decision. But in some sense, the decision has been made here, and there's no threat of there ever being disagreement. Precisely because, look, everybody, dead or alive, is in the prepared state.
So it's
and there's only one way out of the prepared state if the coordinator thinks we're committing.
So it's kind of like durably written when the yes messages are sent, but in sort of an
Oh, absolutely. So I try not to get into like when you flush the disk in this class, but certainly if you study the protocol is incomplete without saying exactly when you synchronously write to the disk. And like, yes, of course, and there's going to be true in Paxos too, although I'm going to gloss it. In Paxos also, you synchronously write your log before sending the message. Has to be. Questions? Yeah.
So there's no way between the sending of like a yes signal and the commit, wrapping up the process for the process to suddenly have its state changed and then be unable to correctly react to the message from the coordinator.
What do you mean? So, I mean, like, sure. I mean, like, you know, a tornado can hit the data center, but then the data's gone, right? It's not like this thing partially happened, right? I mean, maybe I don't understand. So, like, nodes could go down, right? But, yeah, sorry.
I guess kind of what I was asking there was, is there any way for some process like G or something to affect the state of A in a way that makes A unable to respond to the commit after sending a yes?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't understand how the question connects with everything else we've been talking about, because there's only CA and B, right? And we don't have Byzantine failures. We're in the omission model, right? So A's data is not just going to get corrupt for no reason, right? So I guess I don't really understand the question. Or it is a question that you could ask about any protocol. Hey, that protocol's cool, but couldn't some node G just mess with A or something like that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to answer that. Anybody?
For
wanna
your
answer that?
information, on the leftmost, is that C1 or is that G?
So
We
yeah,
have C1 and
the
C.
client.
Okay, so the C1 means client and the C means
Coordinator.
Okay.
Any other questions? Shall I draw a few more pictures of the protocol? So for example, what do you think is the right thing to do in the following scenario? Say again? Yeah, so, well, as we described the protocol so far, this would violate termination, right?
We need a
Because we're not going to decide abort, because there's no no vote. And we're not going to decide commit, because we don't have unanimous yes votes. So what can we do about that? We could add a little bit of logic and say, well, what the coordinator could do is it could set a timer, right? That is like roughly how long it thinks it should take. And we know that in an asynchronous network, this timer is sometimes going to fire too soon. But we just accept that fact. We're willing to trade occasional aborts due to the timer firing too soon, because we think that's better than blocking in the event that we lose this guy. Well, if we have that timer and we get to this point, we say, well, at this point, we haven't received a message. We're just going to speculate that we're never going to receive it. So the same thing to do would probably be to say abort, right? It's always safe to say abort. And we don't want to always say abort because we won't get any work done. this scenario to say abort. So I think I've just argued that, does this protocol tolerate the loss of participants without violating termination? And I think the answer is yes, with this small addition. It's fairly easy to make this protocol tolerate the loss of a participant. And by similar argument, the loss of messages in the omission law. Right? Because similarly, like, if this guy was totally up, but the message was lost, we could invent some reliable delivery to try to increase the chances that the message is redelivered. Or we could just not do that and abort in the unlikely event that a message is lost. Because we're always going to, the client, presumably, when they get the abort, they're going to try again, right? That's fine. We're going to have end-to-end retry driven by the client, as we usually expect. As web developers always anticipate. Somebody's always going to hit a refresh. That's no big deal. So we can tolerate message omissions, and we can tolerate the crash of participants without violating termination. Do you think that's going to turn out to be true about the coordinator too? In particular, what happens if, I'm just not even going to drive the client this time, since I only have a few minutes. What happens if we get into a situation in which something like that happens, and this is like a yes, I don't know. And this was going to be a yes.
Apply the same principle, put a timeout on the participants so that if they don't receive the commit message within some window, then automatically abort.
Then they abort. So here's the problem with that. Smart idea. Very smart guy. David Sheridan had a similar idea. Didn't end up working. So what if this is what had happened, which is indistinguishable to Bob from what I showed you a moment ago?
Yeah.
Alice and Bob decided to commit. The coordinator got unanimous votes. Coordinator transitioned to commit. The decision is commit. Coordinator's messages didn't make it out. Coordinator crashed. Might recover. Decision is commit. Bob, after a certain timeout, decides abort. Violation of agreement. That's no good. I can't decide to abort
Okay.
if somebody might have decided to commit. No way.
You just wait.
There's a couple things we could do sometimes that don't work all the time. We have 4 minutes. Anybody got a thought? So you could just wait. If you just waited, though, you would be violating termination. Like, we know that sometimes you have to do that, so maybe that's fine. Yeah.
What if you wait and we said, like, your yesterday? Like, if you wait like during that time, it's like, well, we haven't heard from the minister yet. Let's be sending those yesterday.
So I think that's totally reasonable. If you think the coordinator's going to come back, retrying your votes is not a bad idea. But the coordinator will necessarily come back, so that won't necessarily get you back.
What if the participants agree to commit?
Yeah, so at least in this scenario, where there's 2 participants and they both voted yes, right? Instead of deciding a board, Bob could wake up and be like, yo, Alex, I voted yes? What's going on with you? He said, I voted yes. Is there anybody else out there? Nope. In this case, that would work if we implemented the protocol in such a way that the coordinator never got to unilaterally decide abort, given that they've given 2. And this depends on some versions of commit. Allow the coordinator, even when she has gotten all yes votes, to decide to abort. And if that's a possibility, this trick isn't going to work. Because knowing that everybody voted yes does not necessarily imply that it was a commit decision. But in the absence of this arrow in the state diagram, that totally works if you could talk to everybody else and they all voted the same way. Right? Now, just very quickly, why would you ever allow the coordinator to unilaterally abort? I'll tell you, because we're almost out of time. In database days, the client might have been connected to the coordinator. The client's running the transaction's running, there's a little hourglass, and then the client Control-C's. Maybe the client control sees and says, give it up, abort it, after these two guys have voted yes. And you still want to make it non-adaptive. So for that reason, like Oracle allows the coordinator to unilaterally abort, even if everybody's voted yes. Because the client might be like, psych.
You mean Oracle the DB?
Oracle the database.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll pick this up again on Friday, but long story short, if the coordinator and even a single participant have crashed, there exists no protocol that can decide to commit a board decision. If only the coordinator has crashed, there are a great many executions in which gossip can help us figure out what the commit decision is. Happy Halloween, everybody! Happy Halloween! Go back to the